The news and sport now on BBC One Scotland with Peter Sissons and Mary Rhodes. It's 10 o'clock.
Arafat responds to massive pressure to crack down on the terrorists. It follows carnage in Israel as suicide bombers strike again. Brown's promise on health reform, more money but no rise in income tax. Robbie Fowler still has it all to do for Leeds after a lacklustre debut. And CIA agents revealed on the ground in Afghanistan. Panorama investigates how the covert war against the world's most wanted terrorists is now being fought. Good evening. After more deadly suicide attacks on Israel, Yasser Arafat today ordered the arrest and detention of the terrorist groups sheltering in his Palestinian territories. He bowed to massive pressure from Washington, where George Bush met Israel's prime minister and demanded that Arafat act. Israel itself, stung by some of the heaviest casualties in recent years, started a massive manhunt, blockading Palestinian towns and borders. The Hamas suicide bombers struck twice in 24 hours, leaving at least 28 dead and hundreds wounded. The carnage began at 11:30 last night when two suicide bombers blew themselves up in a busy street in central Jerusalem, killing 10 teenagers and injuring 170. A car bomb followed minutes later. Then, at around noon today, another suicide bombing on a bus in Haifa left 15 people dead and another 40 injured. From Jerusalem, Orla Gearin reports.
A bus ride home that ended in death. A Palestinian militant got on board the number 16, calmly paid his fare, then blew himself up. The third suicide bombing in 12 hours. Across Israel today, it seemed nowhere was safe. This woman wounded, but lucky to survive such a powerful blast. I saw people flying through the air, this man said. I started screaming and then I passed out. In the hospital, more families in mourning. Israel is bleeding and it's unlikely to hold fire for long. The UN now warning of the danger of all-out war. The terror began last night in downtown Jerusalem. The victims were the young teenagers maimed and killed on this busy pedestrian mall. Two suicide bombers had struck, causing carnage.
Blood around. All the shops broke up, the windows, the cars, everything around just gone.
Survivors clinging to one another for comfort. 10 were killed. The youngest, called Adam, was just 14. The oldest, Yuri, only 20. Then this. A third explosion. The wounded and rescue workers trying to find somewhere to run to escape the bombers of Hamas.
All of them, they want to kill us. They don't want a peace with us. We must to understand this. We must understand this. They don't want a peace. That's it.
Today, the first of the funerals, many more to come. The clock is ticking for Yasser Arafat. Israeli sources say he's got 24 hours to put extremists behind bars. They are coming now to bury the dead and to mourn for the loss of innocent life, for teenagers killed on a night out, for passengers killed on the bus. There is a sense here that this conflict is slipping beyond hope. Israel is enduring its worst moment in years. Tonight, the Palestinian Authority making very public arrests. Some poor acting in this one, though. The wanted man doesn't look too concerned. The question now, will Yasser Arafat crack down in earnest? If he does, he could face war on his own streets. Orla Gearin, BBC News, Jerusalem.
The Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon held talks with President Bush in Washington before flying back for an emergency cabinet meeting. The president described the bombings as horrific acts of murder and called on the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat to hunt down those responsible for the attacks.
For some Israelis, this is obviously the last straw. Anger has replaced any faith there might have been in the peace process. Israel's main ally is America, but today in Jerusalem, the American Special Envoy General Zinni was heckled as he paid his respects. He's been trying to restart diplomacy, but from Israel, the talk now is more about force.
Israel must do now what is necessary to defend its people. We will not allow our children to be slaughtered in the heart of Jerusalem any longer. That's it.
By chance, the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon was in Washington today. He has not said how he will respond, but a major military operation is highly likely. President Bush will have urged restraint. The last thing he wants is an escalation in the conflict that could undermine his coalition. Instead, he warned the Palestinian leader, Yasser Arafat, that he must catch the killers.
Chairman Arafat must do everything in his power to find those who murdered innocent Israelis and bring them to justice.
But that won't be easy. This current cycle of violence may be beyond control. It began 6 weeks ago. An Israeli cabinet minister, a right-winger, was shot dead in Jerusalem. That day, Israeli forces moved into Palestinian areas to catch the gunman. The Palestinians say over 40 people were killed in the following weeks. Day by day, both sides have suffered. Last month, 5 Palestinian boys were killed in one incident. And 9 days ago, a leading member of Hamas was killed by Israeli missiles. Now Hamas says it was behind this weekend's attacks. Tonight, Yasser Arafat promised to clamp down on extremists, but his ministers say the Israelis are making that harder.
They made it very difficult for us to go after the people who violate the ceasefire by bombarding all the police offices and all the security installations and their vehicles.
Ariel Sharon left Washington for an emergency cabinet meeting tomorrow. We'll see his reaction very soon. David Shukman, BBC News.
Our correspondent Tom Carver joins us now from Washington, and Orla Gearin is in Jerusalem. Orla, first, we're getting reports the Israelis have gone in hard tonight.
Well, within the last few minutes, Peter, we've received information that 4 Palestinians have been shot dead by Israeli forces close to the West Bank town of Jenin. The Israeli army is telling us that this was a gun battle, that the 4 dead men were terrorists and that they were attempting to break out of Jenin and head towards Israeli territory. Now, at the moment, we have only their account of things. We do know that elsewhere across the West Bank and Gaza, Yasser Arafat's security forces have been making a very public display, pursuing certain wanted men. Palestinian sources say a total of 75, both from Hamas, which carried out this weekend's attacks, and from Islamic Jihad. But Israelis are already saying that this could be another fairy tale, as they put it, from Yasser Arafat, and reminding people that in the past his jails have had revolving doors and that the militants have been let out almost as quickly as they've been brought in.
Briefly, Orla, what happens if Arafat doesn't hit the terrorists as hard as the Israelis want?
Well, basically what the Israelis are saying is that they will be forced to go and do the job themselves. Now, they're not specifying exactly what form of action they would take, but I think we can assume that we might see a repetition of the previous pattern. They might decide to reoccupy Palestinian towns across the West Bank, send their tanks and troops in there, as they did recently when they stayed for several weeks.
Orla Gearin, thank you. Tom Carver in Washington, do you get the impression the Americans in this meeting between Sharon and Bush were trying to restrain the Israelis in some way?
No, I have to say I don't get that impression. I think that's very significant. Normally after these kind of attacks, the Americans urge restraint on the Israelis, but this time no such public appeal has been made by the Americans. And the Americans know that they can hardly tell the Israelis that they cannot use all the means at their disposal to go after terrorists, when of course that's exactly what the Americans are doing in Afghanistan. But at the end of the day, American officials believe that a military solution is not an option, like the one being pursued in Afghanistan is not an option.